It's
We are,
the
we
internecine
are,
war.
yeah, we are rolling. Speaking of wars, here we are on the 11th of May, 2020. How are you? You're looking fit and brill creamed this morning, and
I don't bro cream, but it just it's getting.
it's
I gotta get your hair cutting thing. But the thing you have is it just shaves it right off,
right
and it
off. Yeah,
wouldn't
but
clip.
mine grows back fairly quickly. So trying to take off a t-shirt, it's like Velcro. It's just there's one of these. And,
How often do you do it?
every other day, but I should be doing it every day. It's just that.
Yeah, because I like it with the shine on
You
top,
like
so
that?
you should keep it nice and shiny.
All buffed.
A
We
couple
have a
of
we have a lovely guest this morning. I will let you please go ahead if you have. I have a
Bishop.
couple of things to share with you, but I will give you first dibs here on this Monday.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get on your nerves.
Oh, we're way past that now. How long have I known
I
you? 30.
mentioned,
I've known you for 37 years. Literally.
but you know what?
How old is
I'm
you,
starting to
how
get
old's
on my
Fiona now?
nerves.
Fiona is how old?
Fiona's 36,
There you go. You see?
and you had
She
that
was
magnificent picture of her, which I still can't find in all our pictures of
oh,
her wearing my glasses.
yes. God, she was a cute kid.
I'd love to be. Anyway, she's got a couple of cute kids of her own.
Yes,
We were
she
out doing
does.
our social distancing in the burbs with the two kids. Leo is running like a track star now. He's about 18 or 19 months old, having the time of his life. Loves it when he throws up his arms, and all the idiots adults do the same thing. Yeah,
Okay. You
I
were
can
in the
get these
driveway
idiots
with
to do anything.
you were in the driveway with a large Miller light or something just sitting there.
Yeah, yeah, on a crappy plastic Adirondack chair. But we had fun.
Good for
It's
you.
not May yet. It's known as the month of Maying,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
The month of Maying,
Hmm.
which is a euphemism
It is.
for
Please continue
sex.
before our guest leaves
Yeah,
us.
leaves. Yeah, I'm not talking to these guys. It's the month of Maying and all that fa la 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 stuff. It's a euphemism, but most words are
Yes.
a euphemism. Cardboard.
And this is going to lead to something visual in a moment, is it?
No, not
It
really.
isn't. Okay.
But I wanted to mention, because I think people should know the dynamic. People think you and I are as close as the Cartwright brothers.
No, it's like
Um,
Seinfeld and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. They didn't speak to each other after the show.
Jerry Seinfeld, I
I'm
wouldn't
just,
be surprised.
I'm just
I
making,
would not be
I'm
surprised.
making
I'd
shit
love
up.
her. I don't
Jerry,
think I'd like him.
Jerry Stiller passed away.
Well, I was just about, oh,
Well, that's where you were
who's
going.
disabled participant screen sharing? I guess this is part of the new,
Oh, I've disabled participant screen sharing. Oh,
yeah,
that's interesting.
that's
Oh,
too
all
bad.
participants, try it now.
Okay, let me just give it a shot here. There we go.
Yeah.
All right, and
This is
yeah,
quickly, just a quick little side note. There's a new version of Zoom Out 5.02, and they have changed some of the security settings. You now need a password, and you have to authorize a bunch of different things. So this is why this is going on. Please continue, Dave.
is there a technological or a technical improvement that the
I
five?
don't know that it's technically improved, but they're certainly going gung ho now to improve their security. So this appears to be an example of that. But here's Mr.
Okay, so
Stiller
Jerry Stiller died at the age of
at 92.
92. He was married to the lovely Ann Mira for
She was
years and
the
years and years.
best.
She died about 5 years ago.
Yep.
And my favorite little known anecdote is way before Stiller or Seinfeld. He and Ann Stiller went on Ed Sullivan after the Beatles. They were the act
That's right.
that
Stiller and
followed
Mira.
Stiller and Mira.
Yep.
And they were a wonderful comedic act. Sullivan had them on all the time, but they were made to follow the Beatles. And of course, the audience at the Ed Sullivan Theater in New York was filled with shrieking 15-year-old girls. And it was very sad. They soldiered on, but they died. It was a long, I gave them full marks for hanging in there, because I was one of those people who didn't want to see the Beatles on Ed Sullivan or in any other place then. I
Oh,
was
really?
a younger brother. I didn't
Oh,
like the Beatles.
you didn't like the Beatles. That says
No,
a lot.
no.
You spent a lot of time locked in a closet as a child, too. Didn't you?
I was a contrarian, which is a euphemism.
Listen, I'm going to pass on my sharing. I'll pick it up tomorrow. It's nothing terribly
I'd
important.
like to meet Diana again.
Let's just get Diana Bishop in here because she's someone whom I have long admired and love to work with. And there she is, ladies and
there
gentlemen.
she is. Oh, Diana, what a
From
tasteful background.
overlooking Georgian Bay. Are you
you
at
up
your
in
Georgian
Collingwood?
Bay, Collingwood? You are,
I
aren't you?
am. I am. I live here full time now when I'm not in Paris.
Outstanding.
Diana, did you get snow the other day?
Yesterday, my dear David. Yesterday and the day before, and probably the day before that. It's like I don't even know where we are anymore. Do you?
God. Well, you know Montreal, we got a couple of flakes, but apparently your neck of the woods and Owen Sound and places like that got blizzards.
Well, because we have the lake effect, right? I'm right at the lake. Literally is 50 meters from me, and so I get lots of gusty winds and everything. But it's lovely, you know. It really is. So how are you guys?
You're
I
in your
can't believe
grandpa's
you.
neck of the woods. Yeah,
I know.
It's great.
I can't believe it. I'm so happy to see you both. I mean, it's got to be 20 years now since I saw you.
Goodness,
oh,
my dear,
golly.
It's more than that. It's going on 30 years, certainly. Yes.
Yes,
Really?
when you walked into the CBC Montreal newsroom, you were about 12 years old.
You were about 12 years.
I wish that was true.
That's right.
But I have a birthday coming up, but I don't count the numbers anymore. I'm just so happy to be alive.
It is something, isn't it? And now, quickly, you worked for the CBC, you worked for CTV, and the last time I saw you, you were on Parliament Hill for CTV, I believe.
And then I went to Global. I can't hold down a job.
And then Global after that.
And NBC, right?
And then NBC. Yes, I did NBC News after I did 4 years in China, 3 with CTV News, and then a year with NBC. And then I went to New York for a year as well.
With NBC?
So, for NBC, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I mean, you know, I saw the interview you did with Steve Paikin, but that's now 3 years ago about your granddad.
Yeah.
But I'm interested, given what we're going through now, about your time in Beijing, or was it too far back to make, and I'm not being facetious, to
no,
make
I know what
give
you're
you
saying.
some perspective of what we're dealing with vis-a-vis China today and getting back into commerce again.
Oh yeah, well, it is interesting because I was even reminiscing this morning about Montreal and all our time there, because wow, you know, those were heady days. But with China, yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I went to China after Tiananmen Square, when China's reputation had been deeply hurt, and it was really trying to gain favor with the international community. So they were opening up, especially to journalists, to come and do stories. Now, having said that, they watched over us like everything we did, but I was pretty much able to go anywhere and do anything I wanted as long as I put in a request to go. And they were, you know, to get rich is glorious was the motto from Deng Xiaoping in those days. So he was really trying to, even though we never saw him, but he, you know, the country was really trying to open up to the rest of the world and show them that they were an international player, if you will. And my goodness, you know, I'm not an expert on China anymore, but that reputation is completely drastically changing with how it's being perceived, and through this virus too. Of course, its reputation has been deeply hurt by that, whether it's true or false, right?
So, and it seems to be able to throw its weight around and is not loath to do it.
You know, I mean, one thing that was happening big time was, you know, of course, they realized in the early 90s that they could be the economic exporter of the world, and that they would be able to corner that market. And that's what happened. I mean, you know, at some point, and I think it's still true in the US, they export a lot more to the US than the US exports to them, right? So so they had that plan way ahead of time. And now, you know, it's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, the whole world is changing. And China, of course, I think a lot of the power shift is moving to the east, but how seamlessly that will happen, I don't know.
So
did you feel manipulated when you were over there and followed? I mean, was there a slight, I guess it sounds strange to say, a normal paranoia when you were there that you were being followed? And
oh God, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure my apartment was bugged. My phone was definitely bugged. And I took a few risks. I was arrested twice. for going into places that I shouldn't go into. Even I went into a hospital one day with my cameraman and without approval. I mean, you get to the point where you just try something, and they would take me and I would be called up to the ministry, and I would have to go and listen to them yell at me for a good 3 hours. It wasn't very scary for me, really. I was more worried about my staff because they could be very vindictive to them, but I was very protective of that. But it's a balance, right? When you're there, you go, okay, I need to tell this story. How far am I willing to go without jeopardizing myself, and more importantly, the people that were working for me at the time? So, but I would have to say, of all the things I did, and I've had an incredible life, I would say that's the highlight of my career, was living there. Yeah, for sure.
And yet
So-
you were probably glad to get out of there when you finally did.
Yeah.
Because I remember talking to Moscow correspondents who said it was fantastic, it was exciting, especially when everything started to fall, but they wanted to get out of Moscow.
Yeah, when you know that you can actually leave at some point, there's some relief in that. But
Yeah.
when I think about the stories I did, and Yvonne, you probably remember this, back in Montreal, I was thinking about how I got started, and they put me on, I think the animal beat was my first beat, a long way from China. And, I can remember doing a story, and maybe it was James Duff or Alan Dever, who was the assignment editor, and they sent me out to do a story about 3 ducks whose fannies got stuck to an ice floe in La Salle somewhere.
Big time.
Big time.
That sounds like a Duff story. Yeah.
I milked it for 3 whole days.
Oh, yes.
I did.
Yeah.
Day 1, duck stuck to the ice. Day 2, village cares about ducks stuck to the ice. And day 3, rescue. So, and I remember it was the lead story on the first midday broadcast for CBC Midday. The lead story.
Well,
3 days.
I knew I was going to do well after that.
If only it were the lead story these days, I'd take it right now,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth.
True
But
enough.
so from journalism, you went on to, and I must show, did the book come next, or did business entrepreneurship come next, or what
Yeah,
came next?
again, I'm a restless soul. I just got to the point where I'd kind of done what I wanted with journalism. And people don't know this about me, but I came from a very entrepreneurial background. My father had a business that I grew up with in public relations, in the Mad Men era, and I did a lot of work for him. And then my brother started a marketing business. So I just thought, I really wanted to do something where I could tap into people's expertise and see if I could package that and create intellectual property. I know it sounds a little bit hypothetical, but if you imagine an executive, for instance, who has a leadership model, and they've been using it for years. Well, what I do is I'll go in and take that and package it into intellectual property, and then take it to market. So I'm very specialized in what I do, and I call it the success story program, just because I'm literally looking at people's success story and taking it to the new level. So I've been doing that now almost 17 years.
Are you still?
And in
you're still
between
at it?
that, in 2017, I then published this book that I'd been writing for a few years. Again, writing books runs in my family. My father was a military historian after he was a journalist first too, for the Windsor Star. Then he started his own business. Then he started writing military history, and he's written 11 books. And my brother too has written 7 business books. So I figured I had to get one down, to keep up with the family.
So, living up to a legend, my adventures with Billy Bishop's ghost, Diana Bishop, whom
Yeah.
I had forgotten, told me years ago that she is Billy Bishop's granddaughter.
Right.
And
And I never knew him. I was only 3 when he died, but honestly, he probably had the most influence of anybody in my life, because his legacy. And I wrote this book starting out thinking I would just write about what it was like to grow up when you have somebody to look up to and he's not really there. And we all have that in our family or somewhere. We all have a hero. But what it ended up, I've really, you go into places that you don't think you're going to ever go into. And what I discovered is, anybody who grew up with parents and grandparents that went through the First and the Second World Wars lived a very different experience, and most of us did. And in my case, I think my family brought the trauma back with them. There was no help for people coming back for the war. So my father, of course, had a lot to live up to as the only son of Billy Bishop. He was a Spitfire pilot in the Second World War. And can you imagine what it must have been like for him to have to go and follow in his father's footsteps? And so when he came back from the war, I mean, he was an incredibly wonderful man, but of course he had a lot of trauma and was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And he brought that back into the family, and it deeply, deeply affected me and shaped my life. So, and he talked about his father endlessly. So that's the book I wrote. And it, as I say, it went to places that I didn't expect it to go. But the response was amazing. I heard from people my age who, again, had parents and grandparents who went through the wars saying, you know, you wrote my story. This is what it was like for me.
Terrific reviews right across the board for the
Yeah,
book.
I know. I was so lucky. My God, I was so nervous. I can't tell you.
Absolutely.
But
Congratulations,
it's interesting,
because
Diana,
and
that
God was an Englishman, I'm told. So.
And that's what my father said.
But it's interesting, Diana. I mean, your dad flew Spitfires. That's pretty heady stuff.
No,
But
David,
if
you're right.
like, it's like being part of the Kennedys. If you can't live up to Joe, it doesn't matter what you do, right?
And you're so right, because my grandfather said to my father, he said, you'll always have that. He said, I never flew a Spitfire. And he said, I would have done anything to have flown a Spitfire. So he gave him credit. And my father was so proud. I mean, one of the stories he always told people was, you know, between him and his father, they shot down 73 German planes. My father shot down 72 and I shot down one. But that one was a big deal in the Second World War, you know?
Yeah.
So he was very good about it, but deep down, I think there was some darkness there. And I adored my father, but I had to learn some forgiveness with him as well.
Has the legend of your grandfather become larger than life over time, do you think?
For you mean for people, Canadians
Yes.
in general, or for
Yes.
me?
Or for you and Canadians in general?
Yeah, for me, definitely. As I say, it took the book for me to realize that just the influence that he's had on my life and all aspects of it. But I think, you know, in a way, he's become such a mythical figure.
Right, that's what I was trying to get at.
There are books and movies and, you know, even there's 2 Rocky Mountains apparently named after him. Who knew, right? Streets and stuff. And he's one of those people, because he had such a large personality and he was handsome and debonair and all of that. He plays right into that of the, you know, the First World War pilot. I mean, they have such a cachet, right? And that'll be forever. I mean, 1,000 years from now, people will look back and see this, they'll look at them as the first knights of the air. So there's always going to be that. And I think we're very lucky to have somebody,
Diana, is there
was so big that way.
You see those pictures of him in that biplane, and he's dashing.
Yeah, with handsome.
They all were. Was there a personality trait of just pushing the limits that they all seem to have in common?
From what I do, I mean, I've read a lot of books about it. And of course, my father's written, you know, umpteen books about it. You know, the flyboy mentality and reputation started there, right? It was, well, really the Knights of the Round Table was this a similar personality. And I think they just embodied that. And so many of them died. I mean, that, you know, April 1917, my grandfather lost every single person on his squadron. He was the only one that survived that. So, you know, imagine what that would take. You can't really get close to anybody. You have to find a way to exist. And he lasted almost 2 years, you know, at a time when
a lifetime, yeah.
Yeah, First World War pilots, you know, the average lifespan was 10 days.
Yeah,
so,
because I mean, the lousy planes would get you just as badly as somebody shooting.
Exactly.
I mean, getting them up
with
to
no parachutes.
miles an hour, yeah.
Yeah, no parachutes. So they were more afraid of fire than they were of anything.
And you were an infant when you were born when he was still alive when you were born.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I remember my mother said that he liked to have me in the room when he took a nap, which he did after lunch because he'd had quite a bit to drink, which also ran in my family and is a big theme in the book.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
I mean, alcoholism was rife from people who came back from the war.
Kudos on the book, because I just started reading it, and it just drags you right in there. And
oh, thank you. I'm glad you're reading it. Thank you.
And the underwear drawer fascinates me too.
That's where my father kept my grandfather's medals in his underwear drawer, and now they are probably one of the most valuable medals on the planet.
Most certainly. You mentioned that in the book too.
Yeah.
So that's quite true.
Yeah.
All right. looking ahead now, have you been confined like the rest of us for the last couple of months, overlooking the
Yeah.
bay and watching the ducks and saying, I did a report on ducks once?
Yeah. Well, I've started naming them. That's
Oh, I see.
how bad it is. Yeah.
That's getting
And of
scary,
course, ducks are
Diana.
very special. So, yeah, and I just wrote a blog. I've got a whole new endeavor,
Oh,
which
yes, I forgot about.
yes, but I'll come to that in a minute. But yes, it's, I'm writing about being on my own and what that's like. I'm in a neighborhood where people all take care of each other and that kind of thing. But 30% of people live alone, and they're going through this on their own, and we don't pay enough attention to that because they may not have family or anything. And I'm getting a lot of response from that. Oh my goodness, you are on top of things, aren't you?
There she is.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
And I'm
okay,
going to
so
get a
this is,
picture taken like that too.
I know that looks better than I do now. My hair is not having a good time. But anyway, again, I started getting restless after the book, and my agent said, "Are you going to do any more writing?" And I thought, "Oh gosh, isn't one enough?" So, but then I started thinking I'd like to write about Paris. And the reason is Paris for me is kind of a metaphor. It's a metaphor for women. I mean, growing up in the era that I did, I found it kind of tricky, the balance between feminism and femininity. Like if you used your female blandishments too much, you were kind of criticized for that, right? And if you were too much of a feminist, you were also criticized for that. So whenever I started going to Paris quite young, because I spoke French and I had wanted to, spend some time there. And every time I went to Paris, I felt empowered. So I know that women my age especially grew up with that kind of ideal. I mean, people look at Paris very romantically still, but especially for that era, I think it was something that we held up to a higher standard, even if it was just a fantasy. So that's how this all started. I started writing about Paris from the woman of a certain age's perspective. And I figured I can do this forever because no matter how old I am, I will always be a woman of a certain age. So there you go. But it's growing into so much more. I'm starting a Paris book club now. I'm starting a virtual adventures club where I'm going to interview famous women around the world who have done extraordinary things. I'm going to start a retail line. So it's now going to be my new thing.
Woman of a certain age in Paris. We will link to all of these lovely sites. Wow, you're Dave, you and I again look like a couple of pikers here.
Oh, come on. You guys are doing
going,
incredible things.
watching the paint of our lives dry while people like that's spectacular.
Diana, you must miss the apartment. I mean, have you got an apartment in some lovely arrondissement in Paris? Or
Well, that's the plan, David. I'm still looking. I've been going and staying a month at a time,
Yeah.
as often as I can, and trying different neighborhoods out so that I can write about them.
Yeah.
But my goal is to find some sort of way I'm not going to buy anything. I mean, it's just too ridiculously hard to do that.
Yeah.
But I have a whole life over there with people that I've met, and I really enjoy it. And I'm missing that terribly, of course, and I don't know how long it'll be before I can.
My wife and her two sisters, when they decided to do, we're a certain age, and we're going to visit any city we want in the world, they chose Paris. And it's funny.
Interesting, eh?
Yeah, because people say, well, if they haven't been to Paris, well, the city's got way too many tourists. The Parisians get a little PO'd with it. And yet when they go, they are transformed.
Yeah, and there is something to that. And of course, that is going to be a book. I'm going to start writing that this summer. And I don't know where that's going to take me, but yeah, I really do think, because I have a very, very loyal following. And women just have this feeling about Paris. But I think it really does tap into something that we have always dealt with, we've been dealing with, right? Yeah, men too, though. I mean, the Enlightenment.
Oh yeah, my brother is a complete Anglophile, but he would take Paris over London any day.
Yeah, it's interesting. You either love one or the other more, but they're both great cities.
Yeah. Wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
Diana, our time is up, my dear.
Yeah, went by quickly. Thank you so much.
It's so great to see you. You haven't changed a bit. You have not
yeah, of course I have,
a bit. It's kind of.
I'm just thrilled to be a guest. I'm going to be a big follower of yours now.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I've told so many people about it too.
Have a good summer and keep us apprised of the evolution of the next book, please.
Okay, and will do. And everybody stay safe, and so wonderful to see you all again.
You too.
Okay,
Live
bye
long
for now.
and prosper,
Bye.
my dear. Bye.
Bye. She really hasn't changed a bit. She's
She
got
hasn't. And
nice
you really got to stop
shimmer.
sitting back like you're on a friggin' lawn chair. There's a microphone there. Have you not done radio for a couple of months in your life? What is wrong with you?
Well,
So,
I started,
Diana, I'm thinking, what? What?
I start enjoying myself, and
I
it just
know. Yes, but
right.
you got to remember that you worked in broadcasting at one time, and this is
Well, I
almost
looked
like a
at the interview we
broadcast.
did with Mitch Joel, and Mitch did not move.
Mitch did not move, and he's got one of these microphones. Maybe we'll get you a headset. That's what we'll do. We got a lot of feedback on Mitch Joel too.
Oh, really?
My mother found it fascinating, as did many others who said once you start listening, and that stream of intelligence coming at you, and you figure, wait a minute, this is too much for me. Then you figure out, no, it isn't. It
Oh
makes
no,
a
this
hell
is
of a
very
lot of sense.
accessible. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It
So
teaches you
bright guy.
if you listen. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
If
which is something that
if
you
you
don't
listen.
do, which is something you don't do. I get this, the phone rings 3 days later. So, did I tell you the joke? No, I told you that joke last Thursday. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Yeah, and apparently we're having a bishop on, or is her name Gloria Bishop?
Gloria. And you were
Just
calling
my
her
brain
Gloria
is.
Bishop in the email. That's very nice.
That's my first boss at
And,
CBC in Montreal.
and again, you and I look like a couple of guys waiting for a bus.
Yeah. Well, I haven't even got to the bus stop. I'm still home in
Still
bed.
waiting. And yeah. Okay. Tomorrow, Russell
Yes.
Copeman is going to join us. Russell, smart guy. I remember when he was just wet behind the ears. There he is.
Well, what behind the ears? Russell's turning the big 6-0 this year.
Yeah, Russell has been. There's been a lot of work done since I last saw him. I haven't seen him in person in many years, but he's a bright guy. He's involved with school boards and education. He was a politician at the city level. He was an M&A. He's done a lot of stuff, and I'm looking forward to finding out where he stands on le déconfinement.
Yeah, this is very, very timely. Russell's already spoken about it.
Yeah.
Been in a couple of the papers, and it seems the premier is really hitting a bit of a rough patch of road.
Oh, yes.
Doing a pretty good job. He seems to have got 4 flat tires.
The bloom is
right now
off the rose for sure. They've even hired, my spouse is showing me a piece from Le Devoir this morning. They've even hired a communications company to work with Horacio Arruda. It's a little bit late to be working with somebody after the horse has bolted here. So,
Well,
they
yeah,
didn't
but
even.
it's interesting. You read Don McPherson, and Don says that he's been handled so much that they've taken away what is charming and believable
Yeah.
about Arruda and turned him into a bit of a spin doctor, which
Yeah, but
I think he is not comfortable with.
No, and he's not doing a very good job of it either. And the entire machine has been stumbling now because, and again, a very large number of I'm sorry to remind you, of dead over the weekend. No newser, no nothing. So they're stumbling, and they're stumbling big time now, and it's too bad. Anyway, we'll talk to Russell about that and many other things.
Okay.
Demain. So
it's
there you
3D.
go.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Do you think Diana had a good time?
I think she